Let's now address some objections associated with these issues of choosing the right church and evaluating various doctrines for oneself. The first objection I'd like to address is one I closely associate with Austin Suggs of Gospel Simplicity. I don't know what it is about him, but he really likes to talk about ecclesial anxiety. So much so that he's apparently written a whole book on it. Now, maybe he or his family or close friends have experience with anxiety or mental health issues. If so, I can understand and sympathize somewhat, but several videos on his channel mention or even highlight this theme, but with a religious twist. In fact, the first time I came across this idea of ecclesial anxiety, at least implicitly, was in Austin's video interviewing Dr. Chris Castaldo on why Protestants become Catholic. I'm sure Austin was quite sincere and of goodwill, but frankly, I had a very strong feeling of disgust and outrage with that video interview. Why? Because it seemed like Austin's guest, if not Austin himself, was merely trying to psychoanalyze Catholics or converts to Catholicism, rather than debunk or disprove Catholicism. Now, despite what Austin intended, the implicit but clearly patronizing message that came across was people don't convert to Catholicism because it is true or because they think it is true, but merely because those converts have some disordered psychological need for epistemological certainty or absolute certainty or a level of certainty we shouldn't even be asking for. Now, one might get the impression from this theory that Protestants are the sane ones because they supposedly don't have this obsessive compulsive need to have certainty about doctrine. Though I don't think that's what Austin thinks because, he recognizes that Protestants who don't immediately convert to Catholicism also struggle with ecclesial or doctrinal anxiety at times. Moreover, there are many Protestants out there who are very comfortable with dogmatism with respect to their biblical interpretations and do believe they have the truth with absolute certainty. So, such a diagnosis by Castaldo fails for them, at least. I've always thought this accusation against Catholicism of producing anxiety, I've always thought of it as a smokescreen, as an ad hominem fallacy, as an attempt to psychologize away the stories of those who convert to Catholicism. Moreover, I'd say it's exactly the opposite. Catholicism provides epistemic peace, whereas Protestantism inherently causes epistemic anxiety, the same kind of anxiety that often affects secularists and atheists, precisely because Protestantism has no objective and coherent epistemological foundation. On Austin Suggs' most recent video on ecclesial anxiety, I wrote the comment displayed here. It's not Catholicism that says you have to figure it all out for yourself. It's sola scriptura and private judgment. Catholicism actually posits a God who sympathizes epistemologically and has provided an incarnational way to know and submit to the truth without tedious labor and anxiety. Protestantism doesn't do that, creating the anxiety. Yes, Catholicism puts greater importance on finding and belonging to the one true church. But so what? Insisting there is one correct answer is not to blame for the anxiety, but rather the notion God has not provided any objective incarnational way out of that anxiety. This is like blaming a math question for having one correct answer, rather than the false teacher who says there's no solid method or answer key at all. Now, one user, Crow1988, responded to my comment without really engaging it. So I then responded and elaborated with, I already anticipated and addressed your points before you even stated them. Saying there is no one right answer to the math question might make every student feel less anxious, but it's not actually based on truth and love. There is no need for anxiety with respect to God's judgment and mercy for someone sincerely and humbly seeking the truth, but one does actually have to be sincere and humble. Sola Scriptura and the right to private judgment does not engender humility. The Christian should be looking for the true church to submit to, not finding a church that submits to one's own interpretations of Scripture on a variety of doctrines. Look, I understand very well that math tests or any challenge to determine the truth about something can cause anxiety in some people. But that's just life. And no reasonable person condemns math or tests or life itself just because it can be very challenging or even confusing at times. You might as well blame truth itself or God himself. Later on in the conversation, Crow, 1998, seems unwilling to acknowledge the truth about Protestant epistemology and then proposes, if not accuses, that exclusive true church claims are arrogant. Here we see the tendency of radical Protestantism toward relativism and atheism rear its ugly head. I point out to Crow, 1998, that one could easily make the same claim about Christianity in general. Does Christianity cause anxiety because it makes an exclusive claim to be the one true religion out of all religions, and that no one comes to the Father and is saved except through Jesus? I know Trent Horn doesn't think it is one of his best books, but there is a lot of truth in the fact that many Protestants do employ the same skeptical secular logic and arguments to attack Catholicism that non-Christians use against Christianity generally. Why won't some Protestants accept the same answer from Catholics that they give to atheists and skeptics? Another issue I had to address was what the Catholic Church actually teaches about salvation outside the church. Catholicism does not teach that one is damned merely for a sincere mistake or ignorance of which church to join. So there is no necessary or logical anxiety from Catholic doctrine on this. Catholicism has always taught that one cannot be saved if one knows Catholicism is the truth and then one deliberately rejects it. That is how one must interpret the ancient teaching of no salvation outside the church. Merely knowing Catholicism exists and makes exclusive claims is not sufficient to bind the conscience to be in union with the Catholic Church. Only God can judge the heart for its sincerity and humility in seeking the truth. Anathema was merely an ecclesial discipline. It does not damn anyone. It does not replace God's final judgment.